Yun nga, may lightning round. Yun naalala ko. Rather than the doctrine, naalala ko lightning round doon. Tapos kinakabahan ko siya. On deck pa naman pa ako hanggang ngayon. Pero okay lang. Kasi ako bumubunot eh. So sabi ko, may na-manifest ko bago every class. Hindi ko mabunot sarili ko.
Di ba nabunot mo sarili mo twice?
Oo. I'm Rainne.
I'm Cheska.
So, Elder Rainne here saying na ang pangit pala ng pagka-deliver ko ng pangalan ng podcast namin dun sa first cut. So, here is me redoing it and officially welcoming you guys to MASCOM. So, MASCOM is actually a wordplay between MASCOM, which is Mass Communication, and Malcolm, which is Malcolm Hall. So, MASCOM because lahat kami dito sa team na to na nagtulong-tulungan para sa gumawa ng podcast na to ay graduate ng Mass Communication. So we have 3 broadcast communication majors, which one of them is Cheska, makikita niyo sa video na to. And we also have 3 journalism majors, which you will get to know more sa future episodes namin. And ako, which I am a graduate of communication research. So, nagkataon itong lahat ng 7 members nito ay blockmates kami dito sa Malcolm Hall. So, Malcolm Hall is actually a building in UP Diliman which houses the College of Law. So, as of this moment, we are all full-time law students struggling our way to become the nation's great lawyers. And this is our way, this podcast is actually our way of igniting the fire of our passion for communication, even though hindi pa kami officially graduates ng college, hindi pa kami abogado. This is our parang happy middle ground to discuss law, to communicate the law, even though we haven't yet taken bar. So, this is our journey in trying to communicate the law and trying to encourage you guys to maybe take law as well. And if you are already taking law, maybe, baka pag gusto nyo ng white noise habang nag-aaral kayo, na feeling nyo, na-miss nyo na yung coffee shop scene na may nagdadala na law students sa paligid, or library scene na may nagchikahan doon sa gilid. Maybe you could use us to keep you company as you venture as in your own journey to become a great lawyer. So that's our name, and you'll get to know more about us in the future episodes. So for now, enjoy the podcast.
Nangyari ito kasi lagi kami nasa harapan ni Cheska pag nasa klase kasi pareho kaming mababa yung attention span. So, kapag sa likod kami, pag nakakita kami ibang tao, wala na. Zone out. So, nangyari ito nung magkatabi kami ni Cheska kasi parang kakatapos ng kaso ng Obergefell, yung diba, yung
Obergefell.
Yung
a legendary landmark case.
So,
and I think the first time it was assigned to us, it was one of the first cases that was assigned to us. Yeah. And we were overwhelmed because it was 100 pages long.
Pero ngayon parang normal na lang yun.
And it was a US case.
Yeah.
But I remember. It's a US case. And we were so clenched as a class, as a first year. We're all just so nervous, especially when there are rumors about how your prof is like. Yes. It's really daunting. So after that recit, it was a lot of readings and that case. Mm-hmm. The next meeting, it was already your cases and like some provisions. And that's when no one wanted to sit in the front row because we were so scared. Like, how are we going to do this? But I said, okay, I'll do it. And then Rainne wanted to sit beside me as well.
Yeah.
We're on the right side of the classroom, facing the prof. And we were just like, we would just be shaking. Before the meeting, we just shake and just be like, okay, let's run through every case of what's important in this case, what's important in this case.
Puro anxiety screams lang ata tayo ng mga panahon na yun. Parang,
like that.
The first case is yung Obergefell. Ang nangyari, pinanood ni Cheska at sinanya sa blog namin yung video, di ba? YouTube video siya.
Yeah. It was like, I think a 5 to 10 minute video about the case. I mean, we all read it at that point, I think. Because we were so clenched. We were like, everyone read it in the full text. But like, it was like 3 a.m. too, or like, madaling araw pa siya. But I knew people were still awake because we were so scared. And I sent it. And then I realized there aren't any like video case summaries
Yeah.
for Philippine cases. And well, okay, we'll get to this like later on, and we'll emphasize it even more. But read the full text. That's very important. But there are times where your mind just wants to watch a video, and I think it's a good way to use the platform as well.
Yeah, especially kapag first year ka pa, like zero knowledge on how to read cases, zero knowledge on what to understand, parang wala lang, parang ka lang nagbasa ng libro na wala kang patutunguhan. Ganun yung parang how we approached the class, the very first class. So, Cheska, bakit nga ba, what's this episode all about?
So our very first episode is called Constitutional Law 1 and How to Recite. Basically, we're gonna talk about the Socratic Method. So what is the Socratic Method in the first place? Ideally, it's an environment wherein the professor and the students would ask questions to each other in order to flesh out the meaning of each case and each provision. However, we know that it's so daunting, especially as a first year law student, whom we've only had mock recit. I think that's the
Yeah.
most experience we've had at that point.
Hindi pa tayo natawag. Hindi ka natawag nun, no?
I was called
Okay, natawag.
very fast because no one knew the answer. And I was like, katabi ko si Chino no, search na kami agad ng sagot. So when I stood up, I said the answer. So the prof just said, okay, sit down. So it's really a different world, especially when, well, we came from the same college. We were from the College of Mass Communication. And everything there is so different. It's much more open. It's much more free flowing. Like you can just raise your hand and say something. But recitation, especially in law school, is way different. So usually the prof will come in, the class will stand up, and then the prof will tell you to sit down, and they'll shuffle, as we know.
Oh my gosh, yung visualization na parang natatraumatize.
I remember Constitutional Law 1 was our first class.
Yes, our very, very first class.
Our very first class, and we were so scared because we've heard all of these things about our professor, so we were just trying to repress and mentally block it out because it's a new year, we never really know what happens. So professor comes in, we have the class cards on his table. He told us to sit down, and he took it, and he started doing this.
Yeah.
And we were not informed that there was going to be recitation, or we didn't know at that point. So we were all just like, he's shuffling it. He's just shuffling it until he told us, everyone relax. There's no recitation. It's just there are cards there, and when I see cards, I want to shuffle. So we were just so clenched talaga to our core. But that's the usual scenario. They'll get the class cards, shuffle it, call up student, and go through the syllabus.
Yeah. So yung Socratic method kasi parang yung concept niya from Socrates, ang peg niya is like the professor does not teach the class, rather she just guides them throughout the discussion. Tapos yung student yung bahala dapat take control of the flow of the class. So it's very different from undergraduate or kahit high school or kahit any type of education nung this time wala. Ikaw bahala.
Yeah. So, well, coming into law school, I had a very different perception of what recitation would be. I just thought it was like, oh yeah, they're just gonna ask questions, and if you read the case, you probably know the answer anyway. However, there are instances wherein you could read the full text twice, backwards, upside down, what have you. But there are just some parts of recitation where you just have to think on your feet. And I think that's what separates it from the usual discussion of, okay, what's in the reading. Sometimes it's application, sometimes it's your opinion, which is actually interesting because law school is notorious for having those jokes like, sir, I think, why I don't care what you think, what does the case say? But there are times where the prof would ask you your opinion. And I think that adds another layer of analysis when it's done properly, I suggest.
So this format, or the format of our podcast in the next few episodes, is basically this class kasi it's offered in our college, Constitutional Law 1, and we tackle the topics na feel namin yun yung mas natutunan namin sa professor namin in real life. So, for example, this is Constitutional Law 1. So, this is the first time we actually encountered reading cases and doing the Socratic Method. So, this is what we're going to discuss. So, first of all, we're going to share a case list. So, basically, this is like Recite. Recite para sa inyo, guys. Recite to, namin dalawa ni Cheska. Tapos, mag-ano na kami, flashback lang kami ng memories namin during the first year when we took the class and how we improve and how we develop into better law students, I guess. Better law students, better in recitation.
More experienced,
More
seasoned
experience.
law student.
Pero hindi pa rin. May mga cases pa rin. Siyempre, may mga bad recitates pa rin kami. Hindi pa rin kami perfect. As our professors continuously tell us. So, we're going to share our case list, and this will be the topics where we're going to discuss. And in our discussion of the cases, we're going to tell you how we recited the case dati and how we would recite the case ngayon, and some tips and tricks for you guys so that you don't think that law school is sobrang daunting. Yun nga. It's actually very fun, di ba?
It's fun. It's fun actually. There are some classes that are better than others in a sense that the environment and the way that people recite are different for every class. And we'll get to that later. But law school can be fun if you make it.
And if you love it.
And if you love it, you have to
if
be
you're grounded in something far better na parang kung bakit ka anong purpose mo sa law school, baka mas may enjoy mo kumpara sa parang nandito ka lang dahil gusto mo yumaman.
I think in first year, if I remember correctly, a lot of profs on the first day would ask, the usual, why are you here? And, right?
Oh, diba?
Why are you
Ganun
here?
sila, as in, ganun sila. Hindi sila,
Like, really blunt. Just, so, bakit ka nandito? What your parents wanted you to be here. And sometimes that's true. So, I remember one prof really told us, if you're just here because your parents told you to be here, you're probably not gonna last until you learn to like really love it and have a passion or something. And I think that may be true. I
yeah,
don't know.
ako din, parang sa mga naririgan stories na ng mga classmates natin na umalis na rin dahil hindi ito yung purpose na hindi sila masaya dito. And if hindi ka masaya dito, hindi ka talaga magiging masaya kahit anong gawin natin. Pero if you understand na the impact of how being a lawyer could change policies, could help people's lives, dun talaga, masaya yung journey kapag yun yung higher purpose mo. So, case list natin, Cheska. Oh my God, ito. Kasi sa law school, pag sa usually naman, binibigay naman ng prof ko ano yung case list para sa araw na yun. So, ito rin gagawin namin.
So, we have 5 cases for today. And take note, these are actual cases that we tackled. So, this isn't just something that we made up or we just searched up. So, this is really coming from our experiences as when we were in first year. So, we have Manila Prince v. GSIS, Angara v. Electoral Commission, Haveliana v. Executive Secretary, Oposa v. Factoran, and lastly, Province of North Cotabato. So, Rainne?
So, sige, tackle natin yung first case. So, in this scenario, ako ang Professor Cheska. So, okay, Miss Kera, let's pretend that may index card ako dito. Okay. After I shuffle, yun yung sound effects sa shuffling. Basta I shuffling. Insert shuffling sound. Tapos nabunot ko, okay, Miss Pamatiga, please recite Manila Prince versus GSIS.
So, when I was in first year, you stand up, you're shaking, and in our class, we had to handwrite our digests or our notes. But for this case, for the first meeting, they allowed us to have printed digests. So when I was in first year, I wasn't called for this case, but I was called in the middle of this case. So our prof style was to call a student, and if they couldn't answer, that student would remain standing and call another one. So there were 2 people already standing. Facts were said, shaking, reading off the digest. Prof was not happy, was not having it, just staring at you, and he would really look at you too.
Yeah.
And that's what makes it even more scary. You're faced against someone who's learned this for over decades and
Yeah.
decades, and it's your first time reading this. So they've mastered this case, and it's your first time saying it. So when I was in first year, I'd probably say, sir, in so in the case of Manila Prince, DGSIS, sir, it was about the and I'd look at my printed digest. I'd be like, oh, it's about the Filipino first policy, sir. So in this case, and then probably like rattle on,
Yeah.
really, really show that I'm really scared, and then missing the topic in the syllabus, which is the important part.
Yes, yes.
And you just be like, okay, you pull out another card,
And you'd remain standing.
and you would remain standing. I probably stood for maybe like 45 minutes. I stood for 45 minutes, and it was just really bad. It was a bad one. I miraculously passed that one, actually. And I saw my grades later on.
Di ba ka
And I
medyo
was like,
gusto ko naman ng prof eh. Like,
yeah,
some profs, of course, may bias pa rin.
yung bias. But I don't know. I think it's because I answered the question that other students couldn't answer. And they've been standing for like a longer time than me. So I think the question that was asked was, so what did they do now after the vote?
Mhm.
After voting for like the two bids rather. What happened after the two bids? What did the other side do? Or like, why is this case important? And then no one could answer, and I said, sir, it's important because had they ruled otherwise, then any person could just bid a very low bid and they'd always win, despite the Filipino first policy. And then I got a little bit of confidence there. So
Kasi
I was
na-
able to
na-
say
ano ka,
the
first.
next day,
Yeah.
and he let me sit down, but there were like 3 other people standing at that point. So this comes to our first tip on how to recite. You have to read the full text.
Yes,
I know.
amen,
Our
amen.
profs say it all the time. It's written in stone. You hear it all the time. Read the original, read the full text. And why? Because my experience, I read the full text for that case. And I'm sure our other blockmates probably read it too. But they probably didn't take note at that point because they already had a digest in
Yeah.
front of them. So digests are very handy, and we know that. When you're in a pinch, get your digest. It's like a memory aid for you.
Mhm.
But for the first time around, really read the in original, read in full text, print it out, download it, highlight it, take notes, digital, physical, anything. You just have to read the full text and know what part of the syllabus it's in.
Mhm.
Because if not, then you're just gonna read it for nothing, and your prof's just gonna get mad at you for not knowing why they even put it there.
Yeah. And actually, di ba, pareho tayo, Cheska, no? Full text niche tayo ever since.
Ever
Kasi,
since.
parang ako, personally, yung digest na ibang tao, hindi siya yung way of thinking mo. So, kapag nagbasa ka ng digest ng nila, mahihirapan kang i-absorb yung topic na nandun sa syllabus. So, ang mangyayari dyan is, parang alam mo lang yung mga facts ng cases. Ikaw na bahala, utak mo bahala yung mag-fill up ng mga missing spots na yun. Ang problema, it could have been easier if you only just read the full text. Kasi in the full text, you get the context, the nuances, and which will eventually help you in the future. Kasi, for example, this case could be taken up in another class, let's say legal method. Pag legal method, yung procedural aspect naman ng kaso na yun. So if you read the full text once and really understood it in that sense, it will be easy for you to review the case in a different class. So, I mean, winner ka.
And honestly, your professors would know too. They know if you've read it full inside out than
Yes.
when you just read the digest. Why? Because there are parts of it, there are certain terms that sometimes they look for certain terms that they know, oh yeah, that's in the full. They've read it, they know this one. And I think some profs, honestly, I think if they know that a student read it, they'd make it a bit easier for them to lead them to the next
Actually.
question. They'd be like, oh, it's in the, diba, it's after this. Oh, what happened after that? They kind of know it. Compared to a digest, kulang-kulang siya, butas siya, let's be honest. Not everything's there. So sometimes when a professor says something, you're just stunned, like, oh, that's not in the digest. And they
Yes.
tell you that to your face, oh, ano,
Yun
wala.
nga eh.
So, and you just
Tapos
stand
imamok
like,
ka nila. Yung isang prof namin dati, literally stands beside us and looks at our digest and says na, oh, wala, wala yan
oh,
dyan,
wala
no?
dyan.
Wala
Is
dyan,
that
no?
even your digest, Miss Setias? And like, it was an adrenaline rush because you just have to use your brain.
Mhm. Pero
And I think that's also part of like reading the full text. When a person reads the full text, they'd understand it better, they'd analyze it better, and they'd see the rashes like this because I've read all of the stuff
yeah.
before it. So when the prof asks, how about if they change the facts? If you know the full text, you know the ratio, you know how it's analyzed, you can answer situational hypothetical questions, which is honestly the whole point of recitation. It's to challenge your critical thinking and analytical skills.
Yes. Yun, especially yan, victim kami dyan lagi, yung pag change ng prof yung one bit of the facts. And if you did not read the ratio talaga, and if you did not read, kahit yung obiter minsan nga, kahit yung obiter lang basahin mo and yung ratio, pag hindi mo binasa yun, wala. As in, nga ka sa recit mo kasi hindi mo alam kung anong sinasabi ng
Which
Yun.
leads us to our next case, in line with reading in the full text. So, Rain?
So, prof, the next case is Angara versus Electoral Commission. So, in this case, it was actually yung kung paano ko ito ni-recite dati, ito, traumatic. Hindi ba traumatic, pero it eventually
Memorable.
memorable. Okay, memorable na lang. Ito yung prof namin siya sa legal profession,
Legal method.
Favorite prof namin kasi we literally knew every case na pinasadahan niya because she was so amazing. Amazing! She was
She
so
was
amazing.
And I think since she was like so amazing and she wanted us to learn, it's like we felt bad if we didn't know the answer. So you'd grind extra hard for this subject. And
so
Rain
what
got
happened
called.
in this case was that ako yung natawag na ma'am. Tapos magkatabi kami ulit ni Cheska. Tapos, I was literally, kasi nga shaking pa rin ako. Of course, first year ka pa rin, kahit ilang weeks na kayo na sa, shaking pa rin. Tapos literally, nakatingin pa ako sa digest, gano'n, nag-glance pa rin ako. Pero sabi ng prof namin, okay, Miss Pamatiga, get Miss Setias,
Get Miss Setias notes.
Oh my God, sana, ma'am, wait! Like, gano'n talaga, wala na akong professionalism. I was just like, ma'am, wait! Kasi ito kasi Cheska, hindi man lang ako pinayagan na, like, last glance, para lang
Ang akin lang nag-aagawan kasi tayo noon.
Oo, kasi nakaganon ako sa paper ko.
Our prof was literally, I'm not joking, it's literally like an arm's length. As in, she can touch us. She can take our notebook for us. So Rain had to do this without notes. So what did you do?
So, syempre sa legal method, different kasi yung facts. Pero in our constitutional law class, it was under the topic of judicial review. So, ako, being the freshie, kalat-kalat yung recit ko. Like, yung facts ko, lahat lang na maalala ko. Like, let's say, yun nangyari kasi sa kaso na to, merong nag-file ng electoral protest, ganun. Sobrang kalat, hindi ko alam kung anong sinasabi ko. Kung ano lang top of mind, binasa ko naman kasi yung full text ng kaso, pero ang problema, hindi ako focused when I was reading it. Like, therefore, yung pumasok ng knowledge sa utak ko, sobrang kalat siya. So, in that sense, ang tip number 2 namin para sa inyo is always check the syllabus. Like, ito yung, actually hanggang second sem ng first year natin, hindi ko pa rin ito ginagawa. Last semester ko lang ito ginawa. And it changed my life. Literally changed my life. Kasi, kapag check mo siya sa syllabus, focus ka magbasa. So, for example, if I were to recite this case now na with the judicial review na topic siya in mind, I would say that, okay, sir, this was actually when the National Assembly confirmed an election by a resolution. It was the Electoral Commission fixed the last day of filing the protest. However, the petitioner said that due to this resolution, it was basically cutting the power of the Electoral Commission in entertaining protests. And on the other hand, the respondent Electoral Commission said that no, you can't. It's not like that because the Electoral Commission actually has the sole power of regulating its proceedings. Therefore, even the dates were up to them. So in this case, if you read the syllabus, ang daming possible na topics dito sa kaso nito kasi it could literally be about admin law na power of the Electoral Commission. It
Like
could
man.
be like math, yun nga. So, ang mangyayari diyan, if hindi mo binasa yung syllabus at hindi mo alam kung saan siya pinlace ng professor mo doon, mahihirapan kang mag-focus ng hindi makikita agad yung issue ng topic. So if I read the case and I saw that, okay, it was judicial review, therefore the issue would probably be whether or not the Supreme Court had jurisdiction over the Electoral Commission and the subject matter of the controversy. So I would say yes, and my discussion would go from there kasi now I understand that the topic is about judicial review. So, what is the basis? What is the legal basis of the judicial
Wait,
review?
wait, wait, wait.
So, as I was saying, if I were guided by the syllabus, I would already know which legal basis I would use. It would be relating to judicial review. So, let's say that, for example, I wrote here na it's Section 1, Paragraph 2 of Article 7 of the 1987 Constitution, and I would elaborate on that. And then, alam ko na kung paano ko siya i-apply sa kaso based on the judicial review. Alam ko na kung ano discuss kong concepts focused on judicial review. Ang problema kasi ganito, kapag hindi ka nag-recite according to what is in the syllabus, the professor will test you. Like, kapag sige, for example, I brought up the issue about administrative agencies. Kasi electoral commission to, or mga ganon. If I said that, the professor, oh sige nga, messages, what's this about admin cases, admin law, ganun. Ikaw, bilang di mo pa naman alam kung ano pinagsasabi mo at nagbasa ka lang ng minimal effort kasi hindi mo pa gets kung paano magbasa. Wala. As in parang, okay sir, mumble ka lang and then, okay, but this is actually the topic of the case, judicial review. So, ganun dapat. Pag nag-recite ka, usually, the prof doesn't ask you questions beyond kung anong case siya sa syllabus. Like, kung ang topic niya is under judicial review, better if you just discuss first the judicial review. And if the professor prompts you otherwise, edi doon ka na lang magbida-bida na binasa mo lahat ng issues ng kaso to. Pero usually focus on where it is placed in the syllabus. Therefore, yun na natanong sa professor. And ako kang prepared kasi aral na aral mo kahit yung ration nung kaso na assign sa'yo.
There have actually been instances wherein you said every issue you could think of in the case, and you're still standing there and you're thinking like, what did I miss? What did I do wrong? What haven't I mentioned? And you're just standing there all because you haven't mentioned what's in the syllabus, what's the topic under. And sometimes your prof would even say that, like, so what's the point of this regarding judicial review? You haven't. That's why I put it there, right?
Yeah, yun nga eh. Oh my God.
Why do you think
I'm
I put it
sorry.
there? And you're just like, sorry.
Minsan din literally the syllabus is your Bible kasi nga brainchild yan ng professor mo. So kung ano nandiyan, kahit yan lang muna for now before ka mag-bar, yan lang muna. Kasi ang mangyayari dyan, if you read the syllabus kasi sometimes obiter lang din yung hinahanap ng professor. Like hindi pa siya yung main issue ng kaso. And if you did not check the syllabus, you would be discussing on and on about the actual issue of the case, which is not the topic in the syllabus. Therefore, wala siyang ambag sa discussion mo. So, magalit yung professor.
Yeah, and in line with this syllabus as your Bible, we actually have a technique to help guide you even further. And that's using your syllabus to actually take notes. In addition to your other notes, whether it's like physical, like you take notes on your full text, you make digests, whatever you have, you can use a syllabus. And that's something Rain and I do all the time.
Kasi
we just look at each other's syllabi. What did you write?
Yung doctrine. You usually put the doctrine
for that case. Maybe the left side is just like a word, a keyword that will unlock everything you know about that case. For
Yeah.
example, what's a good case? What's a torts case?
Torts case. Ito, natas yung knowledge natin sa torts. Ano ba
Had a lot of facts.
Yun nga eh. Yung watermelon. Yung
Oh
watermelon.
yeah.
Grade
Watermelon. See, I know when I hear watermelon, I already know it's about that case wherein a man slipped on a watermelon that was put on a platform and he like cut off his arm.
Yeah.
His leg.
His leg. One of his limbs.
One of his limbs. So, see, I don't know the title of the case. I may not remember it all the time. But when I hear a certain word, that unlocked everything about it. And that's the case that talked about torts versus quasi-delic along with against like a company, like that kind of thing. So I remember that vividly because when I was reading it, I took my syllabus, wrote watermelon beside it on the left side, put the doctrine beside it on the right side where there's more space, like torts v quasi-delic. That's what I put there. So if ever I got called, I can just quickly glance at my syllabus, like, oh, watermelon, and about torts and quasi-delic.
Yes.
So notes are a very important part.
Especially in,
Really?
in the case, next case stand sa ating case, which is Haveliana. This is notorious. Amen.
Did you read this in full text?
Yes, I did. But I did not understand it. Like,
I was confused when I first read it.
yes. Which is in line pa rin naman sa fact na hindi pa kasi natin binabasa yung syllabus sa mga panahon na yun. Pero, a major point there kasi when you read this 500 pages siya, diba? 500 pages.
Yeah,
500 pages worth ng kaso.
With all the opinions.
Makakalimutan mo siya. Talaga. If you don't make notes, kasi especially notes dapat na ikaw gumawa. Kasi pag ibang tao, of course, gumawa, makakalimutan mo siya. Pero if you, like what Cheska said, you put trigger words. For example, you took the dissent from the Haveliana case. You have to put a trigger word that would say, okay, ito yung dissent ni this justice, dissent ni this justice. So para maalala mo siya. And kahit sa majority opinion, pag sa mga, itong Haveliana kasi had a lot of issues, diba? I think 5 major issues yung raise ng, kasi 5 consolidated cases siya. So 5 major issues na raise ng mga petitioners. Tapos if you don't make notes for those cases, those issues, mamamix siya sa utak mo. Like, you would think na one full issue na lang talaga yung kaso. But, pag yung professor mo, especially if it's under, in our syllabus kasi, it was under adoption and amendment of the Constitution. So, of course, the discussion would be dapat more thorough on the amendment of the Constitution. This was the time of martial law. Kaya ito yung, ito yung case about,
landmark case about 1973 Constitution. And I think what added more to our confusion was, see, if a person didn't read it in full text, looked under the syllabus and took notes, they wouldn't realize that the main opinion was actually written by the dissenting justice. And that's what makes it so misleading. So if, like, you just quickly read it, if you don't read it all the way, you wouldn't find out that they actually passed it. Because the entire tone of the first few, like, chapters or pages of it was that it's unconstitutional. It's not allowed, basically. They can't do that. But at the end, the very end, that's when you realize.
Passive lang ng pagsabi na, okay, this is actually enforced to. This is a...
Why? Because of?
Prof, it's because it did not garner enough votes for it to be declared unconstitutional.
Well, because of voting.
Yeah. So yun lang, that mere technicality.
And the other, there was a case at the same time as that case, which was already enforcing or practicing the 1973 Constitution.
So sabi nila, okay na to, ito na yan.
Yeah, it's like, I guess it's in force now.
I guess we can't do anything about it. We just implement the law.
Like if you just remember, oh yeah, it got passed. Obviously, the 1973 Constitution got passed. But if you didn't take note why, and your prof asks you, so the dissenting justice wrote it. Oh, so why did it get passed? And you don't know, you're just standing there. Because it was like 2 sentences lang yun eh.
Like, dispositive
Like,
lang.
yeah, like it was just in a dispositive
Sinabi lang dun na, okay,
due to not garnering enough
yeah.
votes.
And we could not even, the court could not even determine if this was actually passed, but dahil 6-4 ata yung voting, 6-4, so the
No,
majority,
same lang.
ay same lang ba?
Parang same lang siya.
Ayun.
Along with like the absent justice.
Yun. So, ang nangyari, wala. It was dismissed. So, it's still in force, and then, syempre, nagkaroon ng amendment. But, that's the importance of taking notes, especially in a very landmark case pa yun. Landmark case talaga dapat make the most notes possible. Lagay mo ratio, lagay mo yung obiter, lagay mo yung mga dissent, yung concurring, kasi yun talaga yung mga kaso na would be the precedent of all other cases na something like that, na may same topic, same issue. So that's the importance of making notes. So,
And share ko lang, for leg math, I had to recite like a 50 or 60 plus page case without a digest. No one made a digest for that. I didn't have time to make a digest for that because we had persons right after, and that was like heavier for me. So I just read it. I just read the full text, and I put little notes on the margins of the full text, like for real. And that's what I used to recite.
nice.
Just brain blasted my way. And I remember that so vividly because our prof would ask questions that weren't even in the case.
Yeah.
Like, what's a comfort woman? What's that? And she asked me all about the dissent as well. So if I didn't read the dissent and I didn't take note of all the 4 kinds of plagiarism that I had to explain to the class, like she would make me turn to the class and explain, oh, this is the first kind of plagiarism, I would have gotten a 5 for that.
Siya kayo knows, very important talaga na gawa mo talaga yun. Utak mo talaga. Like, ako kahit, for example, if I read your notes, I wouldn't even remember certain, kasi we have different brains. Cheska makes the best yung mga acronyms, and tawag
I make a lot of like I don't know, acronyms, not acronyms, but like
yung letters that symbol, ganun.
Yeah, like I'd make up a word, and that helped our entire block for her constitutional law exam.
For example, ano ba yung mga words na mga pinagawa? Basta marami siyang ginagawa mga ganong key mga sentence, mga words that really don't make sense, pero dahil siya yung katumbas na kaya letter A means authority, letter B means ganon. So, ginagawa ni Cheska yun. Pero if mnemonics yun.
Mnemonics.
So, if only Cheska's brain, only
my brain
do that and can understand that.
I'd ask every blockmate I could see, what's this? And they don't know. They'd be like, whispers mnemonic. Then they'd be like, oh my God, oo nga. And then they'd tell other blockmates like, oh my God, mnemonics.
So, ganun siya. Very important talaga ang taking notes. And then, after taking notes, isa mga important things then to do is really just stand in front of a mirror and recite. So, which takes us to our next, number 4, our tip number 4 is really just practice. Practice talaga to. I think, scary lang siya at first dahil napapangunahan ka ng takot lagi, especially pag freshie ka. Like, hindi mo na maisip na mag-practice pa muna kasi, first of all, hindi mo natapos lahat ng kaso sa case list na given sa coverage na araw na yon. And then, second is, kahit nabasa mo man, hindi mo pa naintindihan. So, parang, a regular person or ako as a freshie dati, I would not think na practice pa ako. Wala na akong naintindihan sa previous cases, but kailangan ko practice. Or actually, it's very important. For example, in our next case, yung oposa versus factoran. So this is a case about intergenerational responsibility. So if ako, I would usually, what would happen here is nung freshie ako, I would, yun nga, like we discussed dati, kalat-kalat yung notes ko. Kalat-kalat yung pag-discuss ko ng kaso. Pero now, if you practice, you would actually get to know the kind of flow that you're comfortable with. Kasi for example, me and Cheska, may similarities yung pag-recite namin is because we really like telling stories.
Yeah.
So yung the way we discuss cases, not necessarily, yun nga, for example, kay Cheska, she forgot the title of the watermelon case. Pero she knows every bit of
I know
context, the
everything
doctor,
about it. I
but
know the
yung pangalan
doctorate.
lang. Yeah, pero hindi naman usually importante yung pangalan unless the professor is weird about it. Pero usually, it's the context that matters. It's the narrative, it's the story that matters. So, for example, here in Oposan, what would happen is if you practice na beforehand, you would get to know the type of discussion you would want to foster during during the actual recitation. So ako, and actually si Cheska din, we would usually discuss the case. Yung parang bigyan mo kami ng short summary. Tapos ang ganun sa recits ni Cheska, she would make a short summary. For example, kung ano yung topic ng case ito and what's it about. So, for example, here in Oposa, I would say na, okay, sir, this is actually a case explaining the intergenerational responsibility in relation to legal standing. So, and then you would discuss the facts. So, here the facts were that the petitioners were minors and they were trying to represent their generation as well as the generations yet
Future
unborn, the
generation.
future generations. And this was about a timber licensing agreement that they wanted to hold, that they wanted to seize, that was issued by the respondent. So in this case, it was a taxpayers class suit. And then the issue here now is whether or not the petitioners had standing, because this was one of the procedural issues that the respondent raised in the Supreme Court in order to stop the petitioners from pursuing and stopping them from passing the TLA. So you notice conversation said how I recited the case here in front of you is that it's really a story. You really have to make it a story that is in relation lagi with the syllabus, in relation lagi with the topic, in order for you to, first of all, remember the case. Kasi hindi mo siya maalala kung you don't visualize the people. Ako, ganun ako. Hindi ko siya naalala kapag walang tao kasi siguro visual learners tayo and we came from masscom. So, visual is everything, audio visual. So, in my head, I play out the characters. Okay, so ito sabi ni petitioner, ito sabi ni respondent, ganun. Parang it's actually a kontrabida-bida kind of situation. So, in my discussion of the case, or in the facts pa lang, in my discussion of the facts, it was a story in relation to, it was a story na related pa rin dun sa topic natin. And I ended up with the issue na of standing. So, and then I would kwento, I would share sa class na, okay, the legal basis of this rule was actually, the issue of standing was not really a big issue according to the court. Yun, okay lang actually sa some professors na medyo lay person yung iyong discussion layperson ng iyong discussion ng rule kasi syempre especially pag first year ka pa hindi pa naman na-expect ng professor na alam mo na kung paano yung mga legal jargon, and some professors even hate it when students use legal jargon kasi nagmamarunong to first year pa lang to, hindi pa nga alam ko ano sinasabi niya.
They'd ask you actually like, oh really? O sige, explain. What's that? You just freeze there like, oh, I wish I didn't say that.
Yeah.
So when in doubt, honestly, when in doubt, just try to explain it as you understand it.
Yes.
As a first year student. Don't really just don't mention things that you're not sure about. It's like the law interview, law entrance interview. Don't say things that you can't defend.
Yes. Actually, protektahan mo lang talaga sarili mo sa recit kasi ang itatanong naman usually ng prof is kapag hinaharap siyang butas sa sinabi mo. So, pag napansin niya na, okay, hindi mo pala alam ibig sabihin ng heedful ecology, so, itanungin nga katatungkol about helpful ecology. So, ang mangyayari dyan, you just dug your own hole. You just buried yourself, girl. Dahil lang you tried to use legal jargon that you weren't really sure about pa. Pero yun nga, professors are considerate naman. So, especially pag first year ka, they are a little bit lenient when it comes to the legal jargon, especially if it does not have that big impact sa topic. So, hindi sila ganun hindi sila ganun magagalit sa situation. So, for example, yun nga, in this case, it was about standing, and then here, professor, what happened is that the court said that the standing was not really a big issue because they would still allow the petitioners to pursue this case even without that intergenerational um, defense, or in a sense, because it was something of general and common interest. So the court would usually relax these procedural standards because it was for the public interest. However, in this case, they specifically determined this concept of intergenerational responsibility, even though in previous cases, like in previous cases and in precedents after this case, we see that intergenerational responsibility is not really, it's not really needed. Parang redundant siya it's redundant sa jurisdiction natin because we relax procedural rules when it comes to public interest. So, yun, practice that, if you practice reciting cases, it would be more conversational with the professor, which is the point of Socratic method. You really have to engage your professor, engage your classmates in the discussion. And if you practice enough, like if you know how you want the conversation to go, makakapasok ka na ng mga parang quick facts, fun facts, gano'n. Which gives your recipe more personality and shows the professor that I really studied for this case, sir. I really studied for this class. So usually, sometimes, mataas yung binibigay ng grade, nakita na lang nag-effort ka.
I remember recently in admin, when I got called, I was one of the first few people who got called. And before I recited, I would say like a little summary, like, "Oh, sir, this is about the commissioner who thought that he had the same qualifications as a judge. So he
Yes.
thought he was a judge and he wanted to be taken out of his position the same way as a judge would." Or I said, "Oh, sir, this is the case about the judge without a sala." So when I recited that and when I mentioned that, I remember our professor would say, "Oh, so Miss Pamatiga, what did the commissioner say? Masyado siyang feeling, kala niya judge." So it was a more relaxed recit compared to like the previous ones I had with him. Because I made it more fun in a way, like it's just me saying, "Oh, sir, he just thought he was a judge, kahit di naman talaga siya judge." Well, in English, of course, but it made the discussion freer and lighter when it really shows that, oh, she read it and she knows the flow of the case. So I guess since she read it, I'll just, let her discuss it the way she would. So I think it's really helpful to make up a story. I think if you're shy to practice in front of a mirror, this is kind of weird, but I do it sometimes. I just get like, I don't know, a jog. Like I don't like seeing myself sometimes. I just get a jog. I look at like my eraser, my pencil. Just say what you know without looking first, and you'll find yourself. You'll take note of, oh, once I reach this point, I don't know what comes next. So let me look at my notes and see. Oh, yeah, it's this part. Then later on, you'll realize, oh, you can just say it without even looking at your notes because you've practiced it so much.
Actually, no face-to-face classes pa, kami dalawang Cheska would usually, like, okay, parang, I think 30 minutes before class lagi. 30 minutes before class, okay, Cheska, let's review the case list. It's parang, chika minute lang. Parang chika minute lang talaga namin dalawa na, okay, so, okay, in Apostle versus Fractal, oh, ito yung
future generation.
Ganun siya. So,
ganun lang. Trigger words.
Yeah, and it helps. It helped me sa maraming recit, like, naaalala ko yung boses ni Cheska sa utak ko. Na parang, okay, ito yung trigger word natin and therefore, ito yung topic na kailangan natin basahin. So, it's really good to practice in front of a mirror, in front of, a classmate.
Soft toy. Whatever. Yeah. Just find time to say it out loud. Because it also helps, like, once you've written it, you've said it out loud, the next time you get called, you can just say it free. Yeah. But as we know, practice doesn't always make perfect. True. In the real world, there are days where you just forget. You just forget, even though you've thought you've mastered it. And that's okay, that's fine. In face-to-face classes, maybe you'd scramble to your notes, you'd look at your syllabus, you'd brain blast, just try to think of like, oh, what's gonna happen next. And one tip is to not say a lot of filler words.
Yeah. So like, this is our tip number 5. So what happens when you forget things? So, for example, in the case of North Cotabato, di ba, Cheska?
So in North Cotabato, it's a really long case,
Mhm.
probably 250 pages. And there were a lot of issues here. It was about the MOA AD, the signing of the MOA AD. And it just had a lot of facts and it was kind of confusing. So it's easy to forget what it's all about. But basically, it's about the signing of the MOA AD. And this case prevented that and held that it was unconstitutional. So in this case, ang dami lang talagang nangyari. And it's natural to forget
Yes.
like all of the nitty-gritty details about it. But what I realized, like after going through 2 semesters, 3 semesters, is when a case is really, really long, but it's under a certain topic,
Mhm.
you can kind of forget about the other smaller issues and the smaller topics. Or maybe you can just like you just have to master like what topic it is under the syllabus, and then after you're done with that, just go through the other issues like okay, ito rin pala yung um ito rin pala yung mga other issues na naka-attach dito.
Yeah.
But honestly, like if you know what the main like issue is, you can just start with that, and when your prof asks you follow up, then that's the only time you can talk about the smaller
Yeah.
issues.
So
If
when
you forget something, it's not the end of the world.
yeah,
Like
totoo.
you can just pause for a bit. Don't say anymore,
Mhm.
or don't like say other words. Just look at your professor, think, and
Breathe.
be brave. Breathe. You'll get to it eventually. Or like if
Yeah.
they realize like oh they've forgotten it, but they seem to know the case, so they must know it. More often than not, they'll guide you to it, and you'll eventually like take it out of your mind palace. Once you're done searching your mind palace, then
Be present
that's
talaga.
it.
Be present, and if you really, kasi yung prof mo naman, magsasabi siya ng mga keywords. Like, kung anong gusto niya marinig sa'yo, she would usually guide you towards that. So that's actually the whole purpose of the Socratic Method. Yun yung ambag ng professor sa Socratic Method is, for example, may specific detail ka na important sa kaso, but you forgot, she would literally, okay, so what happened if this were the case, what would happen here? So, kapag yung mga ganong keywords niya, dapat trigger na yun sa utak mo na, okay, ito yung gusto niyang patunguhang topic. Ito yung gusto niyang point na i-give ko and I haven't said it. So, that's the beauty of reading full text. Kasi pag binigyan ka ng cue ng professor mo ng ganon, which is usually in the full text, pag binigyan ka ng cue na ganon, mag-guide ka na, maaalala mo na, okay, ito nga pala yun. Ito nga pala yung topic na ito yung gusto niya sabihin ko. Basically. So, yun, if you forget something, just
Don't worry about it. Really, just don't be so scared. Like, oh no, I forgot something. They're gonna give me a 5. No, not really. If they see you know it, they'll really
they'll
guide you through it.
Oo.
They'll be kind. They'll ask you like,
Yeah.
okay, but what about, let's say like, oh, what about the it was discussed in the concurring opinion of right? Diba, he mentioned about this. Oh, sige. It's usually like that. Based on our XP,
Kasi,
at least.
yun, it only happens like that if you read the full text. If the professor knows you read the full text. Pero pag obvious, parang if pinapahalata mo sa kanya at nahalata niya na, ay, binubullshit
Ay, wala
lang
tong
ako na
alam.
to.
Ay,
Binasa lang niya yung
di niya
digest.
alam.
Oo.
I'll prod you. They'll prod you even more. They'll prod you even more like, oh, what?
Oh my God, oh my God. The toad. May specific professor kami na ganyan toad. So, kaya nakaka-trigger siya na. So,
You just freeze.
yeah, and tip number 7 is when you're in that situation, if Hail Mary na lang gagawin mo, just be brave and be confident. Like, maraming times na dadadala, ewan ko, pareho sa Cheska eh. So, nadadala ng confidence namin ni Cheska yung recit namin. Kahit we literally don't know anything na. Kasi nga, wala na. Nga na kami. Ubus na yung mind palace namin. We say na, sorry.
With charm. Charm your way. You have to use your social skills.
Pero baka kasi nangyayari lang siya baka babae kasi tayo.
Maybe there was prejudice involved. But
pero pag babae ginagawa namin.
There were times kasi like if you just say it straight forwardly, your prof doesn't even ask questions.
Actually.
I had that XP in persons. The prof would usually ask like two cases sometimes. for that like session, it was 1 case per person. So I just said the case, and that's when I forgot to mention something.
Mhm.
But then she saw me holding the full text in my hand, even though I was far away. And I forgot to mention something. And then she asked me, "Oh, but what about the uncle and the other person?" It's like, "Oh yes, ma'am, that was about the illegitimate child." And I went on like that. So
Mhm.
they guided me. But, I was just confident. I just knew the case. I said it straightforwardly without making a lot of filler words, without doing a lot of dead air like that, like that. No, you shouldn't do that. Don't look around. Don't
Mhm.
look at your seatmate.
5 kayo
You're face
pareho
to
'pag ginawa mo
face.
'yun. Never, never
Don't look
talaga.
at your seatmate, never. Just look at your notes. Look at your syllabus, and look at your prof. Actually, maintaining eye contact, I think, is important. It shows that you have no fear because you know what you're talking
Oo.
about. For
Tsaka
me.
sarili mo lang talaga, paniwalaan mo sarili mo kasi 'pag nakatayo ka sa recit wala kang ibang kasama. Sarili mo lang talaga yung ano mo. So, yun nga, if you did all the other previous steps na sinabi namin and you believe in yourself, yun talaga minsan kulang especially sa freshmen, sa mga freshies, kulang talaga na naniniwala ka sa sarili mo na, okay, I actually deserve to be in this law classroom. I actually fought my way here. I studied very hard. I read the full text beforehand. I made the proper notes. And minsan pag hindi ka naniniwala sa sarili mo, nawawala siya. Your
Ano
body
ka na
believes in that
before it started?
manifestation. So parang, okay, so oh my God, I don't deserve it to be here. Usually kasi pag imposter syndrome, di ba? Parang, I don't deserve to
That
be
that
here.
was me, Ren.
Um,
Sometimes I'd think like, why am I even here? And then I realized, oh wait, I studied naman. I'm still
so,
here. I'm here for a reason. So
yeah,
just never give up.
yeah.
And one example of us, well, of me, just being confident and I don't know. I'm really gonna say I charmed my way throughout our first year. He loves calling me when it's in the middle of someone else's recitation, so it's kind of annoying because you'd expect like, next case na yung aralin ko kasi sa kanya na to. Then
Mm-mm.
they stop talking and you're like, my God, then tinawag ako. So I just had to explain like, oh sir, because in this case, the PNP was transferred to the DOTC, so it's not under the president's direct command. Said something like that. Then he transferred the recitation to me, so it was my turn now in the spotlight. And then I remember like he asked me, am I qualified to be a justice?
Oh
And
my
I
God,
didn't read
I remember
the
that.
provisions for this day. Kasi parang 26 yung cases.
Oo, ang
Ang
dami.
dami ng cases.
Pag
Parang
constitutional
walang
law
nagbasa ng
talaga, ang
provisions.
haba talaga yung
Tapos hindi ko siya
constitutional.
na-note. Hindi ko siya
Mhm.
na-note sa syllabus ko. So when I looked at my syllabus, oh my God, wala siyang laman. Puro doctrine lang. So I was just telling our professor, yes, sir, you're qualified for position of justice. And I was getting my quota. Sir, Article 8 states that a person has to be 40 years old, has to be a resident of the Philippines. And I just tried to just look at him like, yes, sir, I know this.
Did you say yes? Did you say yes na pasok siya sa qualifications?
Oo.
Kasi
Because I said, sir, I remember our discussion. Hindi ko pa nakikita yung article. Sabi ko, sir, I remember our discussion before. We have declared that you were qualified to be the president of the Philippines. So as we know, your age is in the limit prescribed by the Constitution. You just have to really just be like,
during that recitation ni Cheska, yung professor was like, are you sure that my age is pasok daw sa limit na yun?
yeah.
Ganun. So talaga
How do you
nagchikahan
know?
na. Parang,
And I was just like, oh, sir, we talked about it before. You were qualified as a president, so you must be qualified to be a justice. And honestly, he was one of the profs na sobrang clenched ako, lalo na siya yung prof sa Manila BGSIS.
yeah.
It's the same prof. And I was so scared. But that time, it was just like chikahan time. And I would just say, oh, sir, in this case, it was unclenched by that
Actually,
point.
fun magkaroon ng classmate ni Cheska kasi ang pag-after niya, yung recit, gumagaan na. Like, before her, everybody's so clenched. Tapos after
I'm so
her,
clenched.
nagkakaroon na ng onting, okay, parang...
Banter.
Oo, ng banter.
There's more banter with the professor.
Bumabait na.
I think that's important. I think that's important actually. when the prof has more interaction, that's outside the provisions and the cases, because
Yeah.
those things I really didn't know the answer to those
Mm.
things.
But you remember
So
until now,
maybe, yeah, I remember until now, and now I'm a master with like constitutional provisions now. All
which
thanks to that experience, I
yeah.
remember it. Oh, he's a justice. He can be a justice, and
So which gives us
that goes to show
yeah.
that not all profs would act like that.
Yes,
Obviously,
which brings us
all
to
profs are
our last
different.
tip. Last tip. It's to really get to know your prof. Kasi, yun nga, for example, some professors might like Cheska's way of talking to them na parang, okay, dumating yung point na pag tapos mo na malatag yung buong doctrine and all, pwede na maging chummy during the
Mhm.
application portion ng recitation if meron man. Pero some professors might seem na ako, actually, ako yung biktima ng ganyan,
Mhm.
na parang
Tama.
may times na
Tama.
basta yung, may times na yung professor mo, for example, yung professor ko na kausap ko, really hated na how I speak. Na parang kasi sinasabi niya na I speak too confidently daw. Pero wala daw akong laman. Parang gano'n yung sinabi niya in the line na gano'n. Pero
Yeah.
hindi ko lang naman nasagot yung tanong niya. Grabe naman siya. Bobo na ba ako agad?
There was prejudice involved. TBH.
Yeah. We will discuss it on another episode. Maybe the
In another
next
episode. It's for another episode.
So, pag ganun kasi, some professors don't like that na parang I carry myself with such confidence na parang yun actually yung mask mo na lang yun na parang since hindi freshy ka pa, hindi mo pa alam lahat ng kaso. So, i-try mo na lang i-deliver properly yung kaso. Pero that professor was was indifferent about that. She hated it. That's she really pulled me out of the class and told me na you talk too confidently na parang na wala rin naman yung sinasabi. Parang ganon, yung, kasi, oh my God, my heart, I literally cried. pero, pero yun, it just was so na, na dapat talaga kilalanan mo yung professor mo. Na dapat alamin mo na kung ano yung gusto niya sa klase niya, kung how he or she wants you to present yourself. Kahit sa mga ganong minor details, it just makes life easier if you just really get to know your prof and to understand na, okay, at the end of the day though, tao lang to. So, lahat ng sinasabi niya sa akin is probably just a manifestation of his or her own insecurities, maybe, gano'n. Pero, tao lang sila and the purpose that they're there in front of you is because they studied this for the longest time. So, ewan ko, parang as law students, we try to look at, pero syempre, may times pa rin na we draw the line, pero we look at it in a way na, okay, this woman or this man is an expert in her or his field. Therefore, the best thing we could do is just respect that person's preferences when it comes to this. But at the end of the day, basta matuto ka lang. Yun kasi importante. Yun yung purpose itong Socratic Method. And it's really, your grade depends on your prof. So if you don't follow her or his preferences, ikaw lang din yung mahihirapan.
And if you're really worried about your professor, you've heard a lot of stories about them. Honestly, when I was in first year, sobrang daming rumors talaga na, oh, your block, puro ganito dyan, yung prof nyo, puro ganyan. Honestly, try to not listen to it.
Yes.
Because our experience, your experience is gonna be way different than the batch before you, or the sem before you, or the class before you. It's really different and it depends per prof.
Yes.
So, if you're really worried, if the prof is open to asking questions like on the first day introduction, you can ask, like just ask them like, Professor, do you have a preferred way of answering for recitation? Other profs have a format like yes, no, issue, application, yes, no, legal basis, application. Some are more facts, issue, ratio. Some just want the doctrine.
Yeah, doctrine lang.
So it really depends on the prof. And if you fail to ask, don't worry, just observe. They'll let you know anyway. Like, oh no, I'll just look. Just give me the doctrine for this one. So yeah, just try to get to know your prof and be brave, be courageous. Matatapang, matatalino.
Know that everything in law school talaga is just a performance. Ewan ko, ganun ko siya tinitingnan. Performance talaga to. And Socratic Method is one of the the epitome of this performance kasi gigisahin ka ng professor, ganun-ganun. Para kang nasa acting workshop na improv. Ganun. You really have to know your character, you have to know your script, kahit yung context sa script mo. Para kapag tinanong ka ng outside your script, yung adlib mo pasok pa rin sa character mo. So,
Actually, like with rather with online classes, I know some freshmen, they're probably more scared. Maybe they feel that, oh no, I'm performing poorly online. What more if I'm like face to face with my professor? Of course, I'll like be even worse than what I'm performing now. But honestly, it's really just the same for me, at least. It
mhm.
may seem less scary. I know some people think it's less scary because it's not like physically they're not there. But the amount of pressure when they ask you questions that maybe you don't know, you're not sure, or like the next case you haven't mastered yet.
Yeah.
The pressure's all the same. So don't try to put yourself down just because things are online now. Don't invalidate yourself just because you feel that face to face is more serious or more daunting. No, for me, law school is law school. It's scary, but we're trying to make it less scary. And I promise, based on our experience, we're probably dubbed like, oh, that's the worst block to be in because of
Mhm.
their schedule, because of their profs, because of all of these reasons. But we're really trying to make the most of it, and we're trying to enjoy each other's company. So yeah, just if you feel your feelings, if you know how you feel, tell someone, and your blog will help you through it anyway.
Yeah.
Well, at least for me.
So, yeah, that will be, ganun talaga mangyayari. So, that would be also a topic for our next podcast, diba, Cheska? So, that is a little sneak peek from Miss Pamatiga. So, I think we're done, no? Those are all our 8 major steps in trying to survive the Socratic method, even though it's the lifeblood of your legal education. So, once you've mastered this, parang kaya mo na maging abogado, kaya mo na humarap sa mga tao. Siyempre, may mga ethical reasons pa. Pero, kaya mo nang humarap na to defend, ewan ko, in a smaller gathering, maybe defend yourself from your parents, ganun, from yung mga minor away, ganun. Mas, if marunong ka mag-Socratic method, you really master the art of argumentation. And therefore, it's a step closer to being a great lawyer.
So that's all for today. Just remember all the 8 steps, read the full text, take notes, look at the topic in the syllabus, be confident, um, don't be afraid, and know your prof. So that's it from us. Once again, I'm Cheska.
And once again, I'm Rain.
And this is Mascom. Thank you for watching.
Thank you.